This is a demo about a fraud case management system. So the business process is as follows. If a suspicious transaction is detected, the system then goes ahead and assigns a case to an agent. The agent then goes ahead and tries to contact the customer. And so one of two scenarios can happen. If the contact is successful and the customer confirms that it's not a fraud case, then the system goes ahead and closes the case. However, if the customer confirms that this is a valid fraud case, then the system should immediately suspend the credit card and send a notification to the customer via an email and postal. Now, if the call center agent fails to contact the customer, then the system goes ahead and sends a notification for the customer, alerting him that there is a fraud case on his credit card and marks the case with an alert flag. The system then goes ahead and waits for a specific period of time and then checks again. If there is no update to the case, it immediately suspends the credit card and goes ahead and notifies the customer. Of course, if the case is marked as resolved, the system just logs that contact was made and there is no further action needed on this case. An exception to this case is high risk. The system needs to evaluate if the transaction is deemed high risk, and if this is the case, it should immediately suspend the credit card without attempting to contact the customer. Transactions are deemed high risk if the customer segment is silver and the transaction amount is higher than $500, or the segment is gold and the amount is higher than $1,000, or the segment is platinum and the amount is higher than $2,000. The components used in this demo are Red Hat Process Automation Manager deployed on JBoss EAP, along with some Spring Boot services. One of the services is there to suspend the credit card, and the other is to generate the PDF that would be sent to the printing engine and then posted to the customer's address. To send email notification, I'm using the fake SMTP server. Now let's go to the demo. So in the ArchPAM Designer, we've built the process as follows. So the first step is to evaluate the risk. And we're doing that using a guided decision table. Once the evaluation is done, if it's high risk, it will go to the suspend credit card sub-process. That process simply goes ahead and uses a REST API to call the Spring Boot service, and then sends an email, and then generates a PDF again by calling a REST API to call the service to generate the PDF. We are using worker items in the background to implement this. Now, if the transaction is not a high risk, it then creates a user task and assigns that to an agent. The agent goes ahead and tries to contact the customer, and if the contact is made, the system will call a sub-process called post contact process. This process simply checks if the fraud flag is true. It will go ahead and suspend the credit card. If not, it will log that the case is resolved. If we fail to contact the customer, we will try to notify the customer again by an email. A timer will wait for a specific period of time, and then we'll go ahead and call the post contact process one more time. Now let's try to see this in action. So obviously we can use Intando to generate the forms, or we can use our custom forms and build that by tools like jQuery or other web tools. But in this demo, I'm using the default forms that are generated by PAM. So I'm going to provide the transaction details, let's say 400, or let's make it a high value, 1000 AUD transaction in value, for example. And I'm going to provide any credit card, and let's give it case number. And we want to trigger the high risk scenario, so we're going to put a high value amount for a silver segment customer, and we're going to provide a number for the customer account number. Now, before I go ahead and execute the workflow, we're going to call a REST API, and going to check that the credit card is actually active. So the credit card active flag is set to true. We're going to trigger the business process, and if we check the diagram, indeed the evaluation was deemed high risk, and we've called the suspend credit card sub-process. So if I now go and check my API one more time, the credit card status is changed to false, meaning the credit card was suspended. And if I check my email server, I'm going to find that an email was sent to notify the customer that his credit card was suspended. And if I check my folder, I'm going to find that a PDF was generated notifying the customer that his credit card was suspended, and that should be sent to the printing engine in an attempt to notify the customer via mail. Now let's try the second scenario where I do not want to trigger the high risk flag. So this time we're going to input a low amount of 400, and we're going to make the customer segment silver. Once we submit the process, if we take a look at the diagram, this time we did not trigger the high risk evaluation flag, and we've assigned a task to a user. So if I go to my task inbox, there is indeed a task waiting for me. I'm going to pick up that task, and I'm going to mark that we've successfully made contact with the customer and that it is indeed a fraud case. And we're going to move on with the flow. So now if I check my email, I will find that indeed a notification was sent to the customer that his account was suspended, as we expect. Note that the email is populated and generated with the variables we've provided at the start of the flow. I'm going to clear that inbox for our next test. And now let's try the final scenario. So again, in this scenario, we do not want to trigger the high risk evaluation. So we're going to input a low amount of 400 and the customer segment as silver, and trigger the flow. As with our first attempt, we expect a task to be waiting for us, which is the case, but this time, first we'll pick up the task, but this time we will not mark that contact was made. And then let's go ahead and complete this task. Now, if we take a look at the flow, we'll find that the path that was taken indicates that the agent failed to contact the customer, a notification was sent to the customer, and then a timer was triggered to wait for the customer to try and contact the agent and clarify the case. And then we will go to the post-contact process, which will, in our case, find that the fraud flag is raised and will trigger a contract suspension, a credit card suspension, and a notification. Now let's take a look at the notifications that were sent. This time we have two notifications. One, bringing the customer's attention that there is a fraud case and that he needs to contact the support team urgently. And after the timer was finished, we set the timer to 10 seconds. A notification that his credit card was suspended. This concludes our demo. Thank you very much.